Hello, my name is Jacob Buoy, and I'm going to be doing a post-mortem slash how I made it kind of a video on my game Constable. This was my final project for my associate's degree at Schoolcraft College. It was a group project. Here, I'll load up the game so you can see all the names. This was a group project where I did all the coding, all of the game design, and like the coming up with the story and stuff. And my teammates did all the background environments. It was done by Alex Williams. He's a good 3D artist. And all the character design was come up with April West. So Constable is a game that's like a throwback to the point and click adventure games from my childhood. Like a lot of people remember the Humongous Entertainment games. Those would include like Putt Putt Travels Through Time or Pajama Sam. This has more of an adult theme than those games do. It's about solving like a murder mystery, and but it's still the same idea. Coding wise, this was done in ActionScript 3 back when the program was called Flash. I believe around late 2017 is when they converted to Animate. And I've had some bugs working with it in Animate because this was made in early 2017. But I've just recently got it working. When I look at this code, I'm very embarrassed. It was very rudimentary. Basically, it's just booleans. But that's these vars that say yes or no. I could have just did a bool. I don't know why I did var. I think that's what the teacher recommended for us. He didn't really teach us booleans, which are a lot easier. There is one thing that counts for time, and this is probably the only interesting mechanic in the game, the code-wise speaking. And I was actually proud of it way back in the day because it did work. So basically, there's a clock in the bottom right of the screen, and every time the player does an action, that clock increases by 5 minutes. It starts at 8 p.m., and the player's told they have till midnight to solve the case. So once that clock reaches midnight, they get a game over screen. The way that works is that when V time reaches above 48 ticks, which is 48 5-minute intervals from 8 p.m. to midnight, they get to their game over screen. If you guys are ever working in Animate, I strongly recommend naming your keyframe layers that you put your code on, because if you go just by using the time frame, it works. You have a really hard time telling where you're going, especially if you're like me and you spread your code out around. If you name your keyframes, they appear right here. So like let's say I want to go to the gate. Instead of looking for it on the timeline here, I'll be like, oh, the rooms, they were up front. What I did is I just had the name right here. So I would just go to gate. That's the gate. I would also recommend, if you're getting into ActionScript, to use folders. Even though you're not making an animated film, you're making a Flash game. Having these folders really saved me time from knowing which frames I was working in, especially frames that had animation. So the castle folder holds all my rooms. So while I was working on the rooms, like this was the gate room, this was the main hall, I knew that I just had to keep everything in these folders. It's a huge time saver. I also recommend making a background section of your time frame. These are where you put your names in your time frame so that you can see them on the coding screen for the ActionScript 3. Sorry to go on a little rant there, but I'm a stickler for organized code, even if it is as basic as this was. So I'm going to go to the clock, because that was actually a big time waster, because I really didn't know what I was doing. I believe that would be in library. This is all changed in Animate, so I really don't know where it is. Let me just type in clock. There it is. Alright, so this was a movie clip, and I would put a stop on it. I believe if I open this, it'll just say stop. Yes. So it won't play. However, if I were to play it, that's what it would do, and it would go to midnight. Each individual frame has a name. It's like this is 8:35 p.m. This is 11:30 p.m. And so in the game, every time the player like looks at their journal, 5 minutes. They talk to a suspect, 5 minutes. They interrogate the suspect, 5 minutes. They go from a different room to a different room. And this was done mainly because the game was... First of all, I wanted to have this mechanic from the beginning. It was in our original game design document that we came up with. But also the game was kind of easy. It was very rudimentary. There's only like 5 characters. There's like 4 pieces of evidence. And so I wanted to put a time restraint on the player. So like if a player could literally win the game by just walking around and talking to everybody and pressing all the buttons. But by doing this, if the player's towards like... What time would this be? This would be like 11:15. They would know that they only have a few more like options left. So they would have to pick between talking to one witness over the other. In a lot of test games where I've had friends and family play the game where they've actually lost, it was because they were clicking too much. And so when they replayed the game, they took their time, they used the knowledge that they had gained from the first time through the game, and then they were able to beat it. To this day, I still think it's one of my cooler pieces just because it's based in a genre that I really like, which is point-and-click adventure games. And my two partners who were on the art side of this really nailed it, I think. The character designs were awesome by April, but Alex's rooms, I mean, we were right out of high school when we made these, and these are some pretty good 3D animations for it, that is. I hope he's doing great stuff. I haven't really talked to him since high school. So the journal is another cool thing that the code I really liked is, so these icons, let me just go to a different room. So see this footprint in this room? Once the player presses this footprint, it will appear in there. Where is it? And it'll appear in the journal right here. And then they can learn about it. So if I go to see, so like then they could go to the footprint page. If they had not picked up the footprint, it wouldn't be there and they wouldn't be able to click it. This way the players, going back to their journal. I wish I had done more with the character section. Like you could get like hints on like how, well there are kind of hints that tells you like why you suspect this person, but it doesn't really go into detail of like who these people were at the time of the crime scene or like how they feel about one another. That's kind of discovered as you talk to the characters in game. I don't think there's any special code for the journal. Basically how that worked is that I would throw the movie clips, which are just the files that you would click to open. I would throw them off screen if the variable for picking them up was false, and then if it was true, then it would be there. Talking to the characters, sometimes you get what I call in the code, I believe I call it evidence. You need two separate pieces of evidence. So see right here. So this character, when you first talk to them, you need this information to ask them this question. You need this evidence to ask them this question. And I don't know why the C is above the B. That's kind of disturbing. The way that works is the same way. I would just throw it off the screen, the correct movie clip for advancing through the dialogue if they didn't have the variable that allowed them to talk, and then I would keep it there if they get it. I'm just going to go ahead and play through the game and just show you some stuff. I believe it's Control-Enter. I'm really sad that it's really hard to get Flash stuff to work, because I know it's a dead medium that I enjoyed in the 90s, but it was really a very influential part of my childhood. So I'm going to start the game. Here's some backstory. I'm going to be putting a link for this game on my website if you can play Flash files. I believe Internet Explorer, if you still have that on your computer, can run SWF files. I know Chrome has kind of a tough time. Let me try. So I'm just going to, so you just like put the file, I put it on my desktop, and you can just drag it into Internet Explorer. Allow blocked content, bam. So you can still do it in Internet Explorer, but with Chrome and with Firefox and others, I think they've converted HTML, which I'm going to look into. Maybe I can get the HTML working on the website so you guys can just play it on my website. That'd be awesome. So this is the backstory again if you want to play the game yourself. I'm not going to go into detail on how to win. Let's go through the details. So this is the clock I was mentioning. I believe Alex did a 3D model for this, and this was impressive. I remember really liking this. So these are the different rooms you have to investigate. We're just going to jump through a few of them, see how it's increasing the time. And I'm just going to speed up. One thing I wish I added was like indications that the time was getting nearer to midnight, or just maybe even have like a timer up here instead of the bottom right. The human eye tends to not look down in this corner, not to mention the way the lighting is with these 3D renders, which we were just JPEGs into the game. It's kind of, they kind of can't contrast poorly. So we're almost to midnight, and bam, we ran out of time. So that is how that works. Wish I had implemented like, do you want to keep playing? That would literally take a second to add in the code. I'm going to do that. So if you play this game, you will see a button that says go back to the beginning, because that's kind of ridiculous. That's like a one line of code. So that's the clock mechanic. The journal mechanic's really cool too. This is what I was talking about earlier. So right now we have no evidence. And a game design thing I want to mention is the fact that when you look in your journal, you're losing time. I believe my professor didn't like this, as he thought players would need the extra time to look in their journal. But as I said, I found the game with most playtesters, especially those who aren't gamers, to be like a one-time through win the game. It wasn't until I added this where as you're reading in your book, time progresses, which it could be considered artificial difficulty in some way, but it's kind of more of like a realistic thing or to the tone of the game where, I mean, if you're reading in your journal, that could have been time that you were used to like talk to the witnesses or to check the rooms. And pretty much everything in the game that would take you like time in real life to do is what increases the time in the game. One thing I might have wish I added was like various amounts of time. So that would have been easy. So like looking in your journal would probably only take you 5 minutes, but walking from room to room would take you 10. But again, very rudimentary system. So we don't have anything in our journal, but I believe the kitchen has a robe. If we click on that, we would now have the robe in our journal. And we would learn about the robe, and we can even talk to a character about it. This option right here, it wouldn't have been here. I probably should have done that first. It would have said need evidence. So now that we got this evidence, she tells us that that's the king's robe, and now we've learned more. You know what's a good example for that is the footprint. So I'm going to talk to the crow character, who was like the mysterious like forensics guy of the medieval age. And you'll notice that I don't have this evidence option. But when I click on the footprint, I have it in my journal. You don't have to open your journal, but I'm just showing that it's in my journal. And then talk to the crow again. He can now talk to me about the footprint. Postmortem criticism I could give it is it's kind of linear. There's like one path to get the final solution. There's not much room for exploration because of the time limit. Because the player has the time limit, they're not really like allowed to talk to characters multiple times or see if they have new things to say, as opposed to, you know, trying to finish the investigation by time. But overall, this was a really cool project. It's one that I want to keep on my website because I think it shows how I've grown as a game designer. Games like this genre, as basic as this one is, are still really fun. I mean, I've showed this to people, they've really liked it. I would love to somehow, you know, spend a lot of time and make an actual point-and-click adventure game like those from the late 90s, early 2000s. But anyways, thanks for looking at this video. If you'd like to play this game or some of my newer, better games, you could always go to my website at buoygames.com. All my games have a link to download. And thanks for following my work.